Hey guys, it's Eric Green. Listen, how do I make sure that all these potential clients sign my letter and pay me before we start doing work? I use Anchor. Anchor created a fully autonomous billing system and closes the cycle with zero errors. It sends our agreement to the potential client. We'll follow up with them automatically to make sure that agreement is signed. It alerts us when it gets read, when it's signed, and when payment is made. And this way, you know where you are every step of the way. I was so impressed with Anchor, which, by the way, is free. We went to Anchor and have partnered with them. Now, if you go and you register with Anchor, which is free, by the way, if I didn't mention that, you will get access to all of our checklists and letters, okay? But you have to go through our link, all right? Again, by the way, Anchor's free. There is a $5 fee per transaction if you're wondering how they make money. But given that our minimum retainer is $750, it's less than 1%. It's nothing, okay? So again, it's free. They charge the $5, transaction fee on payments, and it will automate your onboarding clients, make follow-up, just puts it on autopilot. It just saves you all that stress and you will close more deals. All right. So sign up here. It's www.sayanchor.com/tax rep. Again, sayanchor.com, sayanchor.com/tax rep, TAXREP. When you go through there, you'll sign up for free and you will have access to all of our letters and checklists, which will save you the trouble of recreating them yourself. All right. Go check out Anchor and put that closing process on autopilot. Guys, I've told my horror story before with S Corp clients and how do you know what reasonable comp is? My horror story is when they went after that CPA who was a friend of mine for $125,000, arguing that he knew and that he knew better and that he should have made sure his clients took reasonable comp. I'm a huge fan of RC reports. RC reports, it's about $1,400 a year. We're charging the S Corps that come to us under audit $750 a piece. We'll probably make between $10,000 and $20,000 with RC reports. But if you have S Corp or C Corp clients, they have to each year get a report, and the report is as simple as possible. RC Reports has a huge database of businesses. It will give you a report that you can rely on. And so far, to date, when we produce that report, not a single auditor has challenged it. The critical thing right now is for your clients to get that report to support the number they're taking on the return, that you're taking on that return that you're signing. Best way to do it, RC Reports. Go check it out, okay? You can find them. It's trn.rcreports.com. Again, trn.rcreports.com. Go there, you'll save $100. It will change your practice, create an annuity stream for you, and bulletproof your clients' corporate returns. The Tax Rep podcast is now proudly partnered with Nice Job, the experts in reputation marketing. Reviews are so important for attracting new clients. Before Nice Job, I would ask people to leave reviews, but they would usually forget, and I didn't have a way to stay on top and remember to follow up with them. That's where Nice Job comes in. Their smart follow-up campaign recognizes who hasn't left a review yet and automatically sends carefully timed reminders that can increase your chances of getting a review by 300%. I tried Nice Job for Tax Rep, and it's been a game changer. We added 33 five-star reviews in our first month, and our Google business profile is like a magnet for new customers. You can try Nice Job for free for 14 days and get 50% off your first 3 months by visiting nicejob.grsm.io/taxrep. nicejob.grsm.io/taxrep. I'm going to put a link in the description of the podcast. Try it. It will be a game changer for your business as well. How do I manage my tax rep practice? How do I get transcripts? How do I track what is going on with the IRS with every single one of my client cases? How do we complete the offer forms, the powers of attorney, everything? We use Tax Help software. Tax Help software is the cornerstone of our practice. We use it for its intelligent ordering. Every single night, it will update the transcripts on our clients, so we will see things happen long before those letters even go to the mail. We can then, react. We can let the client know. We can get all the transcripts we need to determine what our client's best options are, when is the debt going to expire, and we can fill in all of the IRS forms and get them filed accurately, the analysis done correctly. If you're interested in giving it a test, go to taxhelpsoftware.com, use promo code TaxRepTrial, all one word, all caps. You'll get a free 2-week trial. Again, that's taxhelpsoftware.com, TaxRepTrial, all caps, for a free 2-week trial. If you love it and want to buy it, use TaxRep10, capital, all caps, TaxRep10, TaxRep10, all caps, one word. You'll save 10% on your purchase. It will be the engine that runs your tax rep practice, just like it's what we use for ours. Hey, everyone. Thank you for joining us on this week's Tax Rep Network podcast. Very excited to have this week's guest on because, we do talk about marketing, because in terms of people building their IRS rep practice, inevitably it comes down to finding clients, right? Building your reputation. And I get asked a lot about, should I write a book? How do I write a book? Where do I even begin? Maybe I don't like writing. And so I decided, well, might as well go get the expert on writing a book to create authority. So joining me is Paul McManus. Paul has got a number of books out. The one that is out now is the short book formula, which is how to write a book and prove your expertise, create that credibility. He also does a lot with helping people utilize that on like LinkedIn, social media. I know you've got another book you're working on that's going to come out shortly on that. Yeah. So for those of you who don't know Paul, he has a podcast. He's kind of everywhere, frankly. But Paul has worked with over 500 plus financial advisors, CPAs, life insurance providers, business advisors since 2015. He's the author of $1 Million Producer, The Secret Playbook for Financial Professionals to Land High-Value Clients Using LinkedIn. He lives in San Diego with his wife Atsuko and 2 Boston Terriers, Moo and Potato Chips, which is just awesome. And really, like, not only just lives in this space, but you help a lot of these financial professionals learn to do this.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. Thank you for having me so much. Or thank you for having me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm excited to share some of the insights I've learned over the past number of years, especially as it comes to not just thinking about, one day I would like to write a book. I think that's on many people's bucket lists of things to do. But as you can imagine, for many people, excuse me, for many people, there's a number of obstacles. And I think a lot of these, hopefully during this conversation today, we can help people get past those obstacles, because they're actually much easier to navigate than people imagine. Just as I'll throw out one of them for you, which is in the book subtitle, we talk about how to write and publish a book in as little as 6 weeks. And that's important, because what we're trying to help people write is a impactful, meaningful book that they're proud of and that can have a shelf life of 3 to 5 years that does marketing for them. But we also want to make it where it's achievable for your average accountant or CPA or financial professional, frankly, is very busy, has busy schedule, may not see themselves as a writer, may not be a writer. But what they do have is they're in business, they're interested in growing their practice, and they do have experience, and they do have credibility, they do have stories. And now it's simply a way, at least in my mind, of how do you package that in such a way that you can really build this megaphone that you are sending out to the world. And I smiled to myself a little bit earlier when you were introducing me, and you used the phrase that I'm everywhere. And what's ironic is that I barely leave my apartment. I mean, I'm just I'm everywhere, and yet I don't go outside except to walk my dogs. So it's amazing how you can create that for yourself in any business. And I think a book is one of those key pieces of marketing collateral that opens up so many more doors to you.
Well, and what happens is, people get your name as a professional. They Google you.
Yep.
All right. And like, for instance, a website won't get you clients, but your clients are going to go check out your website. So it's critical. Your social media. I mean, I'll be honest. I hate social media. In fact, I've asked my team, can I get off of all this nonsense? No. Because it's credibility. People want to know that they're going to the right place. And again, for me, I find writing kind of cathartic.
Yeah.
Most people don't. And so,
yes.
But when do you get started? So my book, the most recent one, Building $1 Million Tax Rep Practice, I am urging them, you start now. You start today. And why put off to tomorrow? Because if it's on the bucket list, no. This is the kind of thing I would urge them to do now. 6 weeks is quick. I've done it. I know it can be done. And so, but before we get into that, how did you get started doing this? Like, what led you into this space?
Yeah, great question. In 2015, I quit my then career. I was meant to take over a 3 or 4 generation office supplies and furniture business. My grandpa had started in 1920, and I saw the writing on the wall in around 2014, 2013, which was, it's hard to compete with Amazon, especially as a small business, and it's not really rewarding because you're essentially selling commodities. And so at that time, I started going online. I got involved in a group called Book Yourself Solid by a gentleman named Michael Port, who wrote a New York Times best-selling book called Book Yourself Solid. And it was a paradigm shift for me. And so I went from just being this small town business person with a small town focus to suddenly seeing the world, through online as, what do I want to do? What am I inspired by? And so that led me to essentially open up my own marketing agency in 2015 called More Clients, More Fun. And since then, we've been primarily helping financial professionals, and that includes advisors and CPAs and accountants, tap into LinkedIn to build their practice and essentially create that messaging and attract their ideal clients to them. In, I want to say 2018, 2019, I started working with, as a client, his name is Matt Zagula. He wrote a Forbes book called Smart Retirement, and he had a very unique model, which was new to me at the time. And what he did is, so he's a very successful financial advisor, works with a lot of other financial advisors and life insurance agents, but he almost had like a book club. And so they would join his community, and in exchange, they would get so many copies of his book, they get further education. And essentially the advisor would tap into his work, his credibility, all those things, and use that as a key piece of marketing collateral to go out to the market, to build their business, to engage their clients, to get referrals, to do other marketing. And to me, that was completely eye-opening. So I learned something completely new there in that process. I worked with them pretty closely for about 2 years. And what I really saw there was the value of a book as that key piece of marketing collateral. So prior to that, in the LinkedIn activity I was helping advisors with, I want to say, LinkedIn fundamentally, it's a communications tool. I liken it to the modern day phone book. And so, back in the day, you could pick up a phone book and just start calling people and get a certain number of responses. LinkedIn, to a degree, you can do something similar. There's tools, there's automations where you can say, hey, I want to work with X type of people. They have different tools, automations that you can do. So it acts in a similar way. But what I found the biggest challenge is trust, is how do you get, maybe you can solve people's problems. Maybe you have the answer to what their needs are. But the problem is they don't know who you are. And when you're dealing with what I would call high trust purchases, which is I think what you do and what you're, everything that, taxes and IRS representation and any type of financial advice or tax planning, at the end of the day, what do you really want? You want your problem solved, of course, but you want to be able to work with someone who you simply trust, who you believe knows what they're doing, has your best interest at heart, and are going to help take care of it. And how do you communicate that one to many in a way that is manageable? And I found through that experience with Matt Zagula that a book was just incredible, because assuming the other person had an interest, a problem, a need, they're very receptive to saying, yeah, sure, send me a copy of your book or whatever that next step is. And then you have an interested prospect, but you also have a basis for building trust. So now you don't have to talk about yourself so much and your background. Now it's simply shifting the conversation to the ideas in the book. And if the book, well done, it really acts as what I would call, your salesperson in print. It does the work for you, so that when you show up on the phone call, the Zoom call in person, you're not trying to sell yourself. You're not trying to prove yourself. You're simply now just having a high level conversation about, how can I help you? What are your needs? How can I help you? So it radically shrinks the amount of time it takes most people to build trust. And that's why I just totally love a book as the basis for marketing.
And I agree with all of it. And in particular, when they have the book, it's like having a salesperson, because, I got one name, I got another name, and, the way that people are today, give it a week, you're out of sight, out of mind.
Yep.
The book isn't out of sight. It's sitting there. And I found that when people would get a copy of one of my books, like my Iris, the guide to collections,
Mm-hmm.
no matter how many other names, my book was still calling to them because it's there.
Yep.
And they could read it, and you know what? This makes sense. This guy makes sense. He clearly knows what he's doing.
Yep.
No, it is. I couldn't agree. That's why I wanted to do this program. Is I couldn't agree more. And I think for a lot of folks, where to begin, right? How do you get started? But the book, your book now, the short book formula.
Mm-hmm.
What made you decide to write that? I mean, back when your book years ago, The $1 Million Producer.
Mm-hmm.
I got, when this came. I mean, I totally get why, but can you explain what drove you to do it, to put the current book out?
Yeah, definitely. But it was part of my experience. Going back to the example of working with the gentleman who wrote the book and his advisors would distribute it, I ended up working very closely with all of them, or many of them, on helping them market it through LinkedIn. And so I got to know them very well, or a number of them very well. And the consistent thing that I heard back from them was that no one's reading the book, right? So you've invested, in this case, it's probably $10 to $15 to give someone a copy of the book. You give them the book, they say, yes, I'm interested, but it's not really doing its job, at least from my perspective. And so a book has a couple different purposes that Well Done it's doing. One, it's a lead magnet. It's something that people that are starting to think about a certain area, they can start, say yes to something. It's a low threshold offer that you can enter their space without being threatening. And it can be done, online. You're not even aware that it's going on. The second part of it, though, is I call it a sales conversion tool. And so we've already talked a little bit about about the credibility that it helps lend to you. We can go more into that if you want. The other part that really it's the sales conversion. And so I want someone to not just get a copy of the book, but I want and expect them as part of the sales process to read the book. Now, to make that a reasonable step, the book can't be too long, right? And again, this just draws back from that experience. I think his book is maybe, probably 30, 40, probably 40,000 words. And so it's too long. So people are resistant to doing it. And so just through trial and error and, exploring online what other people are doing, I found that to me, I settled on the optimal size of a book should be 60 to 90 minutes. And what that means is that a person can reasonably read it from cover to cover, or if there's an audio version, they can listen to it in a time span of 60 to 90 minutes. I don't want to go shorter than that because I do want to pack in enough substance and enough material. Because really, if you think about this, this is back to the idea of a salesperson in print. This is your best salesperson having an hour of one-on-one time with your prospect, and really giving them all the reasons and stories and credibility and all those things, the thoughts to think that, provoking those thoughts so that after an hour, they're like, ideally they're like, wow, this, I need this. And so you don't want to shorten it too much. So that's where that hour comes in. And on the flip side, you don't want it to be too long because then it just becomes, well, I'll do it someday, becomes a barrier to what you want. But I've found in my sales process and what I coach my clients to do, it's typically one of two variations. Either say someone, I'll just use myself as an example. So either someone hears about me on a podcast like this and they schedule a call. Maybe they got the book, maybe they didn't, but they've heard me talking about it. So they schedule a call and that'll be a 15-minute call. But the first thing that I'm looking to ascertain is, okay, are they a good fit potentially? But next, how much do they know about me? And I'll ask them, so do you have a copy of my book? Have you read my book? And, if the answer is yes, it makes it much easier to then say, okay, well, now let's move on to the next phase. Whereas if they said, no, I haven't gotten your book, I'll say, great, let's do this. I'm going to send you, assuming that you're interested, I'm going to send you a copy of my book and we'll schedule a call for next week, 30, 45 minutes on Zoom. But what I ask is that you take the time to read or to listen to the book in between that. Is that something that you're willing to do? Yes or no? And it's amazing because I find 80% of people will say yes. Maybe out of the, 20% will say no, which is fine because, they've just demonstrated to me that they're not serious enough, at least at this time. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means at this point in time, it's not a big enough problem for them that they want to put in the work to get to the next stage. And so I say, great, when the timing is right for you, you have my book or you can get my book, happy to send it to you, circle back and we'll talk then, but I don't schedule the next call. For the people that do say yes, it's interesting, and I talk about this in my book, is that sometimes they'll say yes, but then not actually follow through. And at that point, of course, in the second call, the first thing I say is, so how'd you like the book? What'd you learn? And if someone says, oh, well, I didn't have a chance to read it, I say, great, that's not a problem, but let's do this. I mean, it's important. It's an important part of our process that you actually understand what we do at a deep level. So if you're open to it, we can schedule another call, give you a chance to read it, and we can go that way. Or if you're opposed to it, then that's fine as well. And maybe this, we just won't go forward. And it's amazing the response is like, oh no, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. I'll read the book, let's schedule, etc. And the whole key to all of that is that in that second call, which is again 30 to 60 minutes, I quote unquote close, and I would say around 80%. And it's not through any selling that I'm doing on the call per se. I mean, the selling has all happened in advance. It happened through the marketing I did to create awareness. It's happening through the person reading the book and coming to their own conclusion that I know what I'm doing and that I'm the right person to help them. And so my total time investment on one-on-one basis, is that first 15-minute call and then say 30 to 60 minutes in a second call with an 80% close rate. And this is with complete strangers. These are people that 2 days ago or 2 weeks ago didn't know who I was, but they heard me on a podcast like this, or they, saw me on LinkedIn and they have a problem and they're looking for an answer and they just come through this process. And so to me, it's just a magical way to be able to attract the right people in a very time efficient way, right? I mean, because it goes back to the question about, biggest obstacle that someone, or biggest mental obstacle someone has about writing a book is, I don't have the time. But imagine all the time you're going to save in the future. Your future self is going to thank you enormously for all the time that you saved them from having to either go through all these long drawn out sales processes that don't close very well or takes a lot of time. Or conversely, maybe you're stuck, working with, what I'd call B and C level clients who aren't really the right clients for you. And you're, getting paid, say, at a lower rate than you want to, I think this whole process helps them to shrink that sales cycle, but also it helps them to, elevate what they can charge and how much they get paid per hour. And so, to me, it's just once you get that, once those things click in and you see it, you just want to do this all day long. And I'm going to guess that you're probably, I mean, you do it your own way, obviously, but I'm going to guess that you would agree to most of that, given that I think you've written, at least from what I saw on your website, like 8 books or something.
No, it's well, and there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, for the folks listening, writing a book doesn't mean you're writing an educational book to teach them how to do it. There's a big difference between my guides, which 250, 300 pages, they're meant to be technical, versus how to build a practice, which is an hour and a half read. And the purpose is not to teach people the nitty gritty of each and everything. It is really meant to be create credibility, give you good information as an overview. But so if you're a CPA or an EA, listening to this, your book is not meant to teach taxpayers to do their own tax planning. That's not what you're doing. Trust me, you don't want to write those books. You don't make very much. Although, because I get asked all the time to update a treatise on something. I'm like, all right, so I'll spend a few thousand hours. They'll give me $500, right? Because they're not going to sell much. No. This is really about credibility. So I guess Paul, what's the first thing that they should be thinking of? What's the first thing that they should know if they're like, you know what, I like this idea.
No.
What's the first thing? Where do they start?
Yeah, and I'm going to share as much as I can during this podcast with you, but I know we have some time constraints. I'm going to also encourage people at the same time, if they want to go a little bit deeper, to get a free copy of my audiobook on my website, which is theshortbookformula.com. But to answer your question, I think it's mindset. I think it's really mindset. And so, the primary case that I'm making throughout the thesis, if you will, of the short book formula is that you want to write a book that's roughly 12,000 words. And 12,000 words means that a person can read or listen to it in 60 to 90 minutes. And so I think just clarity around that, because too often people, think that they have to write this 40,000 word book, and that's what really scares them and gets them bogged down. So clarity of that is important. Second is it really, I think it behooves people, especially if they haven't written a book, it behooves people to get help. And that help could be me, could be other people. But if you're not an expert at doing this and you're creating your first book, you really want to follow a roadmap of what works. And so you can get from point A to point B as quickly as possible. To your point earlier, my point will give a lot of the what and the why, and it'll give basic principles of what to include and what not to include. But at the end of the day, it's a little bit generic in terms of, okay, well, now what do I do? And that's where fundamentally I encourage people to reach out and get help in writing it. I want to let people know that it's possible to accomplish this at a very high level, very high quality. Again, something that has a shelf life of 3 to 5 years in as little as 6 weeks. To give you a little sense of our process that we take people through, it consists of about 2 to 3 hours. So a 1-hour Zoom meeting once a week. And in this case, we're simply, I don't want to say extracting, but that's, I guess, a good word. We're getting the information from the author. We're asking them questions. We have them come prepared so that they know what they're doing. But really, they're just talking about their book. Those things that based on their experience, their stories, all those things that they naturally do and probably don't even think about. We're capturing that through Zoom calls once a week over 6 weeks. And at the same time, in between that, we're asking them to spend maybe 1 to 2 hours in preparation. So, it's the higher quality information they give us, the better quality the book is. And so we do want them to take it seriously and go through what I call the author journey, right? So you start with an idea, ideas start percolating, but the more time you have to let those ideas percolate, a lot of different things are going to come to mind, and you're going to end up with a bigger book. But we do that over a 6-week process. From a writing standpoint, and feel free to jump in if you want. But from a writing standpoint, we don't expect them to write. We expect them to know what they're doing to get that information. We capture it. We write out the first draft for them, and then it's essentially a collaborative editing process. And so At the end of the day, we want them to have a book that they're proud of, that serves their purpose of writing the book in the first place, which is to build their credibility, grow their practice. And that's where I think the perfection or the fine tuning, it's not just one and done, but that's where typically there's about 2 to 4 drafts we go back and forth on until we're both 100% satisfied. Okay, this is the book. Now we're ready to talk about publishing it.
So for the folks who are listening who are interested, how do you onboard a new client? I'll put the link down so anyone listening who wants to get a hold of Paul certainly can. I highly recommend it because unless you're like me and you like to write, and by the way, it's a lot of work. Again, at 4 a.m, I find it cathartic to just data dump out of my head. Most people don't feel that way. So you're one of those people that don't feel that way, but really do want to do this. I will, again, put the contact information. But so Paul, I reach out to you. I love that. I heard you. I love this idea. How do we get started? Like how would you onboard somebody new? Get started with the Zooms and what does that process look like?
Yeah, great. So it starts with a 15-minute phone call. And this is just a chance, for us to get to know each other a little bit. Just to make sure it's a good fit, right? We take a lot of, we put a lot of energy and time into what we do. And so we want to make sure that we're bringing on people that we feel are a good fit. And that just really boils down to nice people who have a message and have some level of experience that they can talk about. I think the most difficult thing is that if someone's just like, I want to write a book, but I don't know what to talk about, right? That's probably not the best fit. And so someone who has some level of experience, I want to add to that though, there's also this thing, and I'd love to maybe get your take on this, if you're familiar with this term, is imposter syndrome. Sometimes we think, oh, I have to have 20 degrees and have to be recognized by 20 different things before I'm eligible to write a book. Can I throw that back to you and have you address that?
I'll tell everyone a quick story. Let me address the first thing. Like, if you're sitting there like, well, I don't know what I want to write about. So first of all, what do you want to get out of this? Well, I want more high-end clients. Okay. Why would somebody want to come? In other words, I'm a big fan of where do we want to get to and engineer backwards. Let's build the path to get there. So, for instance, for tax rep, in my book, I mentioned, if you don't want to do innocent spouse cases, don't market for innocent spouse cases, right? Right? I only want to do criminal tax cases. Well, then write a book about criminal tax, blog about criminal tax, be the person in that area. So give some thought to really in terms of, well, what am I going to talk about? What clientele do you want? What facet are you? Estate planning, insurance, whatever. And I think you're going to find that you will start to narrow down to what you should be talking about. In terms of the imposter syndrome, when I first got approached by accountants to train them in IRS rep, I built out a training course. We started selling it on the internet. And at some point, I realized I would never sell enough if I didn't partner with one of the big players. So it was, Drake, Intuit, CCH, the NAEA, whatever. None of them were interested except for CCH. Ultimately, they licensed the product from me. I'm going to go out there to record it. And I suddenly got cold feet. Who am I to do this? Be on video, CCA, they're going to be selling, and I can name 10 people that are probably better than me at this at the time around the country. I'm going to look like a jerk. I'm talking myself out of it.
Yeah.
And I ended up speaking to one of my mentors about it. And he said, you know what, Eric? He said, first of all, those like experienced top tier criminal tax lawyers around the country, they're not buying the product. They have no interest in it. So the idea that they're going to be watching this, picking it apart, no offense, they got better things to do. Number one. Number two, you know more than 95% of your audience knows. That's your credibility. But that you have the skills. And he really put it very more bluntly for me of, everything you've done, creating the course, selling it, whatever, the pitching to all these companies have all led you to this moment. It's either go or go home. And at some point excuse me, but I basically was like, fuck it, I'm going to do this. And whatever it is, it is. And as usual, all of the major folks, the players in my field, one, not only did they never buy it or any of that, what's funny is with the success of Tax Rep, I've had them now approach me at the ABA meeting saying, how did you do this? When I viewed it as retail, they're all like, hell, I hate practice. How did you do this? So you know what I think is, if you're a CPA or you're an insurance, I mean, you've got the knowledge, right? And you've got more knowledge than 95% of your audience does, who's going to read this. Other financial advisors aren't going to go buy your book. They don't need your book. So the imposter syndrome, first of all, you know more than you think, right? Yeah. By the way, if you're really that concerned, you got weekends, roll up your sleeves and reacquaint yourself, dive into it, right? And so mostly to convince yourself, you know what, I really do know what I'm talking about. I know you give yourself, the kind of the pat on the back or the comfort level that, you know what, I'm not a fake. I'm reviewing this. I do know what I'm doing. I do right by my clients. I can advise them properly. That's all you need to do. And just that is something, unfortunately, you got to get over, or admit you're going to be in your small practice, and that's what it's going to be because you're unwilling to put yourself out there. But put yourself out there.
Yeah, so I agree with everything you just said. Especially, I love the begin with the end in mind. And that's really where it starts. It's what is the so it's not this War and Peace. This is my story. I was born in this year. It's like that's not what we're writing the book. It's there's a end result, which is I want to attract more of this type of person and sell more of this type of service. And from there, what is the story arc, or what's the journey that we're going to take the ideal reader, prospect, client from where they are in their mind with the problem, what's the problem, and how do we take them seamlessly to the answer, which should be you and your services. I love everything that you said about the imposter syndrome, because I just wanted to throw that in there, because while we say we want people to have experience and a point of view, it's not it's don't overthink that, right?
Right.
I think the best way to get past imposter syndrome is to actually do it. Writing a book, it's amazing. At least in my experience, you start with imposter syndrome quite often. You publish your book, and suddenly it flips because you start seeing people treating you with more status and respect. It's like, oh wow, you're an author. That's really cool. And then suddenly, everyone's different, but it's like, I am pretty cool. I did do this, and so it's as much as a piece of marketing collateral. It's also a personal journey, which is why we do it over 6 weeks, because we don't want to shortchange that, where you go from maybe a little bit of uncertainty about the focus, but you end up with something that you're like, wow, if I could get this into the hands of the right people, I could sit back and let them come to me and really be able to help them at a high level. And that's ultimately what we're trying to accomplish with our clients. And then in our case, we start with a book, and that's 6 weeks. And then we also talk to them, if they're interested, about how to best market the book, right? So I think a lot of programs out there, or some, they'll, if you have a book coach, for example, well, guess what they're selling you? Book coaching, right? But they're not offering you a complete package to write your book, publish your book, and then market your book.
Right.
And if you're really looking at doing this to grow your practice, I think you want to think about the whole journey, so that you're successful in it and you get a very quick ROI, and hopefully an exponential ROI. As I mentioned, the shelf life of these books, I think, is reasonably 3 to 5 years. They're also, a lot of people also get what I call the bug, right? Writing your first book is a big deal, and it's, to get it written and published. But once you see the impact it can have on your practice, suddenly it's like, well, that wasn't so hard. We'll write another book. And that's also, again, part of the short book, right? So if each book's roughly 12,000 words and it's pretty specific in terms of topic and solution, well, now maybe you every once a year, okay, coming out with a new book, coming out with a new book, coming out with a new book. And I think that's how you potentially can exponentially grow your authority in the field. I mean, I'd love to have you maybe share a little bit more of you. What if I could turn the tables on you? But it sounded like from your story that you went from approaching these people and they're like, "Who are you?" to now they're like, "Tell us your secrets."
So I ended up taking one of my outlines on iris collection and did a guide. Now, from the guide, it was just the process. Well, people started commenting about how do you resolve it? So I took those chapters out, expanded, that became the second guide on resolving tax debts.
Yep.
Interestingly, well, what about more liens and levies? I took those paragraphs, expanded, that became the guide to liens and levies. Yeah. In other words, it's like almost like you lay the foundation and then you can keep building up and off of it. The how to build $1 million tax practice just came from the questions. Well, Eric, how did you do this and how did you do that? So I'm like, and for me, I would get in webinars, I'll get, "You're brilliant, you're this." Trust me, I'm not. You hang around with me long enough, that'll become obvious. And so what I did, I wrote the book really was to, if this goofball can do it, anyone can do it. But also it isn't like, well, I started this and people just bought it and everyone just loved it and everyone just loved us and we've never had any problems.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And so the book is, for better or worse, the ups and downs. But what I'm hoping the message people came away from is, you have a plan, you execute the plan. There are going to be highs and lows. You just keep working at it. Yep. And it's amazing that if you show up and work, how often that things will work out for you. Yep. But the point is, as you said, you do your first, and then what happens is, oh, what about this and this? And you can actually build off of the one. Now you pretty soon you have like this series where you have the 2024 version or whatever it is. It's almost like getting momentum, right?
It is.
You have to get started. Once you have that momentum, it's easier to kind of keep it going, right? You now that you have the process, this isn't that bad. I don't have to be panicked. And a lot of the frustrated, in terms of other people coming up to me later, the frustrations I have with practice, it's amazing. They have the same frustrations. There are big firms in Manhattan or Washington, doesn't matter. They have the same frustrations. And when they look at this, like, you get paid to do this? You get paid to teach people? How do you do that? How do you do that? It was a little eye-opening because that's not what I was expecting. But you're not alone. I think it's really the answer in this. You're not alone, and it's doable. Paul, I mean, you help them, but the truth is, I think once you help them, and they're like, "Huh, that wasn't that bad." Again, you did a lot of the writing, but I get it, and I can see where the wheels start to turn. Because that's what happened to me. The wheels start turning, and be like, "What about this? What about this?" And now the ideas start, and that's how you end up with 8 books, and
Well, and just to be super clear about that's part of our process, is that what we don't want to do, and how we don't position ourselves, is just as ghostwriters, right? So I think a lot of people have an idea. It's like, hey, go hire someone to write my book, and then I'm an author. But it's really, how much time did you invest in that, right? So if you didn't invest an adequate amount of time, it's really, sure, it's your book, it has your name on it, but you're not really proud of it. And that's important, not from an ego perspective, but the way that we help our clients do it is we want to get all of their stories, their ideas. We don't start writing anything until we've captured the ideas from them, because we want to reflect back in the book what they said, not what we think about the matter. And I think the magical part of that is that when you capture those stories, and this is where people just need guidance, right? I mean, we all have stories that if we're prompted and encouraged, we're going to go back and we're going to get. And when you capture those stories and you put them in the book strategically, right, so they serve a purpose, and then you start having people read the book, especially as part of that sales process, and then you meet with them and they're like, "Oh, what you did," they start telling you your stories. And so I love it when you meet someone and you've never, I've never met with them before. Maybe I met with them, for 15 minutes, but I really don't know them yet. And they're like telling me my stories. I mean, that's so awesome, right?
Well, I think, and what's critical is it has to be in your voice.
It does. Yeah,
It has to capture your voice. Or frankly, I think the potential clients begin to realize that there's a disconnect here. But when it's in your voice, and if nothing else, it's consistent.
Yep.
Right? Your thoughts and the way you approach things, and that comes through. It's huge. It is a huge boost because you now have a warm. It's like a warm lead. You have a warm audience coming to you after they've read the book because they've read the book. They have now said, "I want to work with you."
Yeah, no, 100%. And so I'm happy to go anywhere you want, but I don't know about how you're doing on time, but
I know we have. I'm running short on time, but I know, and we have another one coming out, so we'll probably do this again with when the next one comes out. But in terms of the short book formula, I'm going to put a link below. I will also put a link below so anyone listening, you can get in contact with Paul. And if you've been kind of thinking about this, my advice is don't put it off. Get going today. If you want to get no reason to wait. What are you waiting for? Let's just get. If you're waiting for the stars to align, ain't gonna happen. All right. So just the easiest thing is just get started. Take your first step. Get started, and before you know it, you will be a published author, and you will start bringing in the clients that you want to bring in.
Yeah. Can I share one story?
Absolutely.
One last story. So one of the things that we do, or we encourage people, and I do myself, and so everything I do, I eat my own dog food, so to speak. So meaning that I only teach people and do things for people that I do myself to grow my own practice. And so when I published this book, I think I published it at the beginning of this year or the end of last year. So around the beginning of this year. And immediately I'm thinking, okay, I need to go promote this. And so now that I have this book, I want to get on, podcasts like I'm doing right now. This is part of that promotional strategy. And, here we are, it's 7 months later, but, it's just, I'm going to be going on as many podcasts as I can over an extended amount of period because it has a long shelf life. One of my early podcasts, though, was with a gentleman who I didn't know at the time, but he's a Barron's Hall of Fame advisor. He manages $8 billion in assets. And so, I don't know if the accounting audience understands that as well, but that's like, the top, not just top 1%, but like the top
1/10 of 1%.
And since then he's become a client of mine, and we're doing a number of things together. But the only reason I opened up that opportunity was through the book and then the subsequent podcasting, right? There's very little other mechanisms to be able to create those kind of massive opportunities, right? So, by the same token, since I met him, he's been introducing me to people, and so I just spoke at an event with 100 of my ideal clients. And again, you trace it back. How did I land this opportunity? Well, it started with publishing the book. And then when the book was published, I needed to promote it. So I did podcasts. And these things just have this snowball effect that you can't always predict it in advance. But if you're looking to either, just grow your centers of influence, grow your ability to speak, grow your awareness for your practice, whatever that specific is for you, this just becomes one of those catalysts that can really launch you in the direction that you want to go. To your point, it doesn't do everything, right? You don't publish the book and say, hey, I'm just going to sit back and all the money comes in, right? There's steps, there's work, there's effort, there's all these things. But to me, at least in my experience, is probably the most enjoyable way to grow my business, because what do I have to do? Well, I sit here and get to have enjoyable conversations with people like yourself, right? I mean, this is about the extent of my marketing now is going on podcasts and having fun conversations about something that I'm really passionate about.
Oh yeah, no, and I found too when each book would come out, I would get contacted. Would you come speak to this group? I loved your book, and so now they're inviting me to speak to a whole bunch of people who are potential clients. Of course, I'll be happy to. And these days, most of it's webinars and Zooms. I don't even have to travel anymore. So it opens up doors. It creates instant credibility, and it's the gift that keeps giving.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. So no, Paul, listen, thank you for joining me. We're going to have you back on when the next one comes out. Again, everyone listening, what I'm going to do is I will put the contact information in the description. Reach out to Paul. And again, if this is something you want to do, start doing it. There's no reason to wait. Otherwise, Paul, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you. It's a really enjoyable conversation.
All right. Thank you all for listening. And if everything, check out the description, the links, and I will see you on next week's podcast.